roll. When we first talked with this, you immediately said, I want to do this poet.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
I look back at my passion for poetry, and Rainer Maria Rilke was one of the first fires that got into me. His many poems and his letters to a young poet. When I was a teenager, those words of wisdom, his spiritual yearning, his gorgeous use of language, his sense of seeking, his interesting angst and tension of being human with an awareness of God. I think these things really spoke to me a lot, and so I wanted to. When I saw who was missing on your project, I thought, well, Rainer Maria, and whenever possible, you should always plumb the depths of people with 3 names. But I do think that he has, in this particular sonnet, I was very interested to find out that some of this writing, which I think is some of his strongest writing, was perhaps channeled. I mean, he said he was taking dictation. And I think when I look back at my songs and my poems, a lot of times I feel the poet, Andre Gide put it very well when he said, art is the collaboration between God and the artist, and the less the artist does, the better. So in this sense, I feel that by using the deity Orpheus, he was indeed having a dialogue with God and facing the interesting limitations and possibilities of being a human being.
But also in the poem, it's saying that, I think that when you're a poet, you feel like a god, or you are a god because you're creating. I certainly know that when I'm writing, the happiest I am is when I'm writing and 5 hours passes and I had no idea that the 5 hours passed. You feel the same way with that?
I feel it's, I don't know that I do believe that all of us are God, and that's a big part of my sense of the underlying identity of all of us. But I think that we think of that as hubris, when in fact it's our real identity, that all of us are made of this magnificent essence. And how do we get in touch with it? And writing poetry and creating music and having walks in nature and loving someone, these are ways that people have found to connect with that essence that we all have. And I think that poetry in particular in my life, and the spontaneity that I've spent a lot of my life greeting the muse. Who is the muse? Who is that person that writes through us? When I first discovered about automatic writing, I was reading Bob Dylan's book Tarantula, and he had this magnificent novel of free association writing. James Joyce did free association writing. Who is that? Just James Joyce writing? Is that just Bob Dylan? Is that just me? I don't know. But I think Rainer Maria Rilke certainly had a good relationship with his muse, because some of these poems, and what's so interesting also is so many different tones that come out of the different translations. I chose the translation by Robert Bly. I thought his was the most powerful. Whether it's the truest to Rilke, I don't know, but it spoke to me the most, and so I thought that was important.
Let's talk something about technical too, because as a songwriter, you're a songwriter, and tell me the difference between a poem and a lyric.
I think frequently the difference between a poem and a lyric is that poems don't need music. They're complete by themselves, whereas a lyric is the bird without the wings, and the music is the pair of wings. I've set many poems to music, and some of those moments were out of just sheer exuberance and admiration for the poems. I did set one Robert Frost poem called Revelation that he wrote when he was 19, and I thought that really was improved by having music. So maybe in the end it's a lyric. I set a Cole Porter poem to music, and I think that it is improved with music. So I think traditionally lyrics are more form-driven. They usually traditionally have more rhyme in them. These days poems don't need to rhyme. They can explore any number of kinds of forms, but lyrics tend to have more structure to them for the sake of memory and power and expression. But sometimes the lines these days in the contemporary world are very blurred, and I like that. I think it's interesting to to hear the music and poems and hear the poetry and lyrics.
And when you're writing something in not music but words, you know it's going to be a poem or a lyric before you write it, or does it tell you what it's going to be when you start writing it?
I think like a person, it takes a while to get to know something, and I've spent a lot of years writing free association poems, and one of the poems I wrote the night before the harmonic convergence in 1987, it was my prayer for world peace. And when I finished looking at the poem, I thought, this needs to be a song. It just seems to want to be a song. So I immediately went to the piano and set it to music, and it became my first song that Barbra Streisand recorded, called At the Same Time. So that was an interesting encounter. But there's so many poems that I've written that I've never dared to set music because I think they stand on their own. But someday, some rainy day, I might feel melancholy and look at these old poems and say, you know, there's a new birth inside of these words, and it's time to discover, you know, what happens when you add music to them.
That's fantastic. Well, I could talk to you all day. But the last thing I need you to do is look at the camera and say the word poetry.
Poetry.